Okay, we are live. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sanjay Jain, and today we are here to talk about the India stack and how you can build applications around it. Without much further ado, we go on to the presentation. How about now? Can you hear me? Okay, so I guess you couldn't hear me any while I was in the presentation mode at all. Hold on. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So I'm going to restart again from the beginning and we'll take it from there. So good afternoon. This is Sanjay Jain here. I'm here to talk to you about the India stack, and together we'll discuss how it can be used to build applications. Uh, the India stack, before we start, here's where you can go to get more information. On the indiastack.org website, there's a Slack channel, there's a lot of information about each of the APIs, how you can build to them, and all of the URLs are right here. In terms of questions, I'll be happy if you start to post your questions to the live stream, but I will respond to them only towards the end of the presentation. So I normally start to talk about how Edison got his patent on power generation and distribution about 125 years ago. And that if he were to come back alive today, he would still be able to recognize the way power is generated and distributed today. On the other hand, at the same time, another patent was granted, this time to Alexander Graham Bell. And if he were to come today, he would not recognize what had become of his invention. We believe that if he had come back 25 years ago, he would still have seen some resemblance, but today the resemblance is gone. And the source of this is really when you're allowed to add equipment to the telephone network that didn't come from the telephone company itself. This led to layered innovation, which has led to many, many layers of innovation, which leads you to where we are today. And this is really how you would see modern stacks develop. If you take a look at the most companies, they build on technology which is fundamentally initially funded by the US government. This resulted in the creation of TCP/IP, the internet, SMTP, and the last one that I believe falls in this category would be the GPS. And then companies built on top of it, typically in Silicon Valley, large companies built quite a bit of infrastructure on it, which then they allowed other people to use. So for example, Google Maps builds on top of all of this technology and yet allows other applications to build on top of it. In the meantime, we also had smartphones that developed out of the telephony system, and they also allow other applications to build on top of it. And in parallel to all of this, we have seen the evolution of payment systems. They started from cards and then went on to many different forms, including Apple Pay today. And you might realize that if any one of these layers had not happened, an Uber could not have been created on top of it. Airbnb or Amazon in their current form also rely heavily on each and every one of these layers. And this is the typical nature of a tech stack. Now, one of the things we believe is very important to some of these APIs is what we call the hourglass architecture. The hourglass is a figure with a thin, narrow waist, which doesn't change very often. And then you have layered innovation on both sides. And every innovation adds to more innovation on the other. So for example, with Aadhaar, you can have innovation along the biometric sensor dimension, and that would aid any application that is built on top of Aadhaar. Similarly with TCP/IP, if you built a router, it helps anybody who's built an application well over the TCP/IP layer, including HTTP, etc. So I'll quickly want to run through some of the trends in the country today. You're all aware of the acronym JAM, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and Mobile. And if you notice that in Jan Dhan, we have had over 275 million accounts that have been opened so far. A large amount of money is deposited in these accounts, averaging around 2,000 to 3,000 rupees. And in addition, many more services have been layered on top of this. Similarly, we have had regulatory innovation where we had the nationalization of banks 49 years ago, but then only 14 new banks came alive. But then in the last 2 years, we have seen 21 new banking licenses have been granted. A few of them have already gone live just now, and many more will come in this new year. We have had Aadhaar, which has been about now almost 6 years since the launch of the program, and we have started from a small base to reach to 1 billion enrollments in about 5.5 years. This is one of the fastest enrollments globally in any of these systems, and today that number is already past 1.1 billion. We have had smartphones, not just mobile phones, growing quite rapidly. In the last year and a half, we have seen them grow at the rate of about 25 million phones per quarter, and we believe that by 2020, every adult in the country will have a smartphone. And as you can see, the India stack was built over a period of 7 years, The first was the launch of Aadhaar authentication in 2010, along with Aadhaar enrollment. Within a year of that, the financial system started to adopt Aadhaar through the Aadhaar payment bridge, which is used for where Aadhaar is used as a payment address, and this has been the basis for the direct benefit transfer. At the same time, the Aadhaar enabled payment system came into being, and this allows money to be withdrawn or deposited using Aadhaar. This has been used by the business correspondent network to take banking away from the bank branches to where people live. In 2012, once Aadhaar was accepted as an ID by all the regulatory systems, the UIDAI launched Aadhaar eKYC, which allows the data that is sitting on the Aadhaar letter to be given in an electronic form to the requesting entity, and this really should eliminate the use of paper copies. And then in 2015, with the launch of Digital India, the two new programs were launched. One was eSign and DigiLocker. And then in the last year, we have seen the launch of UPI. And I'll just walk through each of these layers very quickly. The first layer is Aadhaar. As you know, it's a 12-digit number. It's unique for a lifetime. Very little demographic data is collected: name, date of birth, age, gender, address, and then optionally mobile number and email address. It also captures a photograph, 10 fingerprints, and 2 iris. These are used to provide uniqueness so that one person can get only one number. Authentication is the API that allows you to verify if the person is indeed who they claim to be. Only a yes or no answer is provided. It operates 24/7. The important thing with eKYC is that you actually get back the same data that is in the Aadhaar card, including the photograph. This allows you to, instead of give a photocopy, to do a digital account opening process. And then you really don't have any paper that's floating around for potential misuse. eSign is a digital signature based on Aadhaar. It allows a person to use Aadhaar authentication to sign a document. There are two requirements for a digital signature. One is that the data in the digital signature should correspond to a public database. Aadhaar qualifies. The second is that the person should be the same as whose data it is. And so if the signature is done in the context of an Aadhaar authentication, you are able to create a digital signature and apply it and satisfy all of the regulatory requirements. The digital locker allows documents to be created digitally and then provided to a requester based on user consent. So a document, for example, a school mark sheet could be sent from the board to the digital locker, and then when the student approves it, it is then made available to a potential college or an employer. The process is entirely digital and traceable back to the source. This increases trust in the documents, and it also prevents forgeries. It allows you to carry your documents everywhere. And then the unified payment interface, which was launched middle of last year, and then you had the application called Bheem, which was launched by the Prime Minister in December. This allows you to create a virtual payment address. You don't need to disclose your IFSC code and account number to anybody. You just provide a virtual address to the person you're transacting with, and you can push or pull money from somebody else. It works with bank accounts, so everybody who's in the banking system is able to work with it. It's immediate, there's no risk, and the cost to the bank is minimal. And hence, this is a very useful state-of-the-world payment system. We haven't seen this anywhere else in the world, and it's live right now, and the number of transactions growing quite rapidly. And last is the consent architecture. We believe that we are moving into a world where digital data is going to be an important part of everyday life. And before this data starts to go and spread in a very uncontrolled way, we would like to make sure it happens with the consent of the person whose data it is. And this is part of the digital locker specifications, but more broadly, it allows data flow to be done very simply. So let's take one example. So today when I apply for a loan, I go collect data from my employer, from my banks, from many other places, and make a copy and give them to the bank from whom I'm taking a loan. And they then use these paper copies and go push it through their system so they can take a decision and then give me a loan. If instead of that I had just given them a letter saying, here's my employer, please go and collect my pay slips from him, and here's my bank, please collect my bank statements, and you can use this information for processing a loan, and in the event you approve the loan, you can keep it for the life of the loan. Otherwise, in 3 months, you will destroy this data. So this letter that I give is a consent artifact. They should be able to take this, go to the data providers, get a digital copy of the data, and then use it in the way that is specified in the artifact, and then keep on alerting me as my data gets used, and hence keep me in control of the entire data flow. This is quite consistent with the legal frameworks we have in India. It separates the data and the consent flows, and it creates for many interesting applications to come alive. And this really completes what we call the stack. This is the India stack. It's built on the Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile infrastructure. It creates a presenceless layer where I can do a transaction without being in front of anybody. So I can open a bank account from my own home. It creates a paperless layer which allows me to transact without exchanging a piece of paper. This is done through the use of Aadhaar eKYC for identity documents, e-sign for contracts, etc., and the digital locker for certificates and other documents. The cashless layer is done through UPI, where I can now do a transaction without being in front of the other party. And the consent layer is what really allows a modern privacy-based data sharing framework. And then you have new applications that are built on top of it. So now let me sort of just talk about the numbers. Jan Dhan, I already mentioned, is past 270 million. Aadhaar enrollment has crossed 1.1 billion. The number of, we are currently authenticating almost slightly more than 500 million authentications every month. eKYC's numbers are also going up. The Aadhaar payment bridge, which is used for direct benefits transfer, also is close to 400 million. Multiple billion dollars worth of transactions have gone through the system over the past 3 years. With UPI, there have been over 7 million transactions in the last few months, and so on. The numbers just keep growing. Now, the India Stack ecosystem runs through a regulated architecture where you typically have the set of regulated entities that connect to each other and that then allow access to other people. So we have about 30 odd banks on the unified payment interface. We have 4 service providers for e-sign. For Aadhaar, Auth and eKYC, we have a few hundred entities that are licensed to access the system. And then many startups and applications can build on top of these. There are many more platforms coming across the country which are digital in nature. GSTN, the Goods and Services Tax Network, will also be coming up very shortly, and that is processing in the range of 5 billion invoices a month. The Bharat Bill Payment System can help process over 1 billion bills every month, and it will increase the number of digital transactions quite significantly. It will also make life easy for everybody concerned because they can now pay their utility bills, from the comfort of their home, through the mobile, wherever they are. Electronic toll collections through the FASTag brand name is an interoperable RFID tag which will rely on top of the underlying payment infrastructure, which can then ensure ease of movement of vehicles on the highways. And as a result, over the next 5 years, we will go from being a data poor to a data rich nation. And this will allow for a lot of scale and inclusion that was not possible earlier. And it's important that as we go through this transition, we do it in a very thoughtful manner, keeping security and convenience in mind. So thus making life better for everybody. As an example, if you realize in payment systems, we always work with various factors of authentication, which are from either a what you know factor, something like a PIN or a password, a what you have factor, like a card, and a who you are factor, some kind of identity proof. And over the next year, we are seeing more and more of the what you have factor, the smartphone, becoming dominant, and Aadhaar authentication coming in as well as a who you are factor. This combines security with convenience, and it allows you to create the equivalent of the one-click two-factor authentication. And we already have smartphones coming in with embedded iris devices, and we expect many more to come in the near future. Why is it disruptive? The India Stack allows innovation, it removes physical presence requirements, it aligns market goals with social goals because it's a broad-based, ubiquitous, inclusive platform. It cuts onboarding costs, it cuts transaction costs, and at the same time, it increases trust. And hence, it allows a completely new business architecture to develop, which could not have done before. So far, we have seen government adoption of the India Stack. We have seen regulated entities adopt it. And we hope very soon we are going to see more and more innovative businesses come in and adopt the stack for various uses. So just to give some examples of the usage, we had a very large bank who got McKinsey to actually help them reimagine the customer onboarding process. And they took the process from 6 days to 1 hour. They reduced the drop-offs in the process because people, when it takes so long, will drop off partially in the middle of the process. They increased the number of times the data was first time right, and they freed up the branch capacity to do actually a lot more. We had somebody, again McKinsey, help out with a mutual fund company to reimagine their channel management process, and they took transaction time down from 4 hours to 2 minutes. And again, this reduced operational costs, reduced operational issues, improved customer retention, and many other advantages that come from being digital. We had Reliance Jio do over 50 million onboardings in 2 months. Actually, they've already crossed the 100 million mark, but in the first 2 months, they saved at least 15 rupees for every SIM issued because of paper. And the more important thing was the improvement in customer experience, which they were able to achieve with the walkout working. You went in, you got a SIM, and by the time you're out of the store, it is working. The numbers growth is incredible. You already saw the numbers earlier. Over the last 4 years, you can see that you've gone from around 5,000 transactions a day to about 13.5 million, and in fact now we are closer to 20 million transactions a day. eKYC went in 6 months from 200,000 a day to 4 million a day, and now the number is even more. So one example that we use typically is of providing credit without friction. Because this use case now includes all of the layers of the stack, I will walk through it and then I will step over for questions. We start with our user, a prototypical user called Rajni. So Rajni is a daily wage laborer. She gets up in the morning, she buys vegetables, she comes back, processes them, creates food, which she then sells. However, she's unable to get a loan in today's systems. The reason is threefold. One is the cost of selling a loan is very high. The ability to have somebody come to her, get her documentation, process it, and be able to approve the loan, that's the cost of sales, is very high. The cost of servicing the loan, the ability for them to accept payments, to monitor what's happening, uh, is again high for a customer like Rajni. And then there is no credible data about her. There's no credit history, no transaction details, and hence it's very hard to evaluate whether she's a good risk or a bad risk. As a result, in the formal system, we find that customers who have the lowest default rates have the highest interest rates. This is in the microfinance section where the default rates are under 0.5% and the loan costs are as high as 24 to 30%. But with the India stack, all of these problems are easy to solve. So we just reimagine how it works. So if Rajni were to say she needs a loan, 6 in the morning before going to the vegetable market, she says that. She agrees to share data about herself. She sees loan offers. She accepts the best offer, receives the loan, sells her goods, and then at the end of the day, she repays the loan. If she's able to do this entirely from her smartphone, then we are done. So to do this, what do we need? We need a credit marketplace app. We need a consent architecture. We need the credit marketplace itself. We need the ability to do paperless contracts. And then we need the transaction account and application, and then the payment applications. Each of these solutions can be made live with the India stack. So with Aadhaar eKYC, she can identify herself and open her loan account. With the DigiLocker and with authorization from the consent layer, she can share data about herself. The thing that is specific to loans is a domain-specific API that can be built for a loan marketplace. She can execute the loan agreements through eSign and the DigiLocker, and then with UPI, she can get her transactions done. And this solution is completely enabled today. So we actually did a pilot. Within 5 minutes, we were able to disburse loans in a cashless and paperless manner. I will not discuss the pilot here, but suffice to say, this is a theory that if a person gets credit on the basis of their digital footprints and see business growth, this will improve their feeling of well-being, and they will in turn ask their customers to go cashless and paperless. And this is the virtuous cycle that we would like to enable for credit. I'm going to stop here and take some questions now. So we have a question from Sumit. Can we use Aadhaar data for user data verification in our web system? Is it available? Is it available through the developer API? The answer is yes. Aadhaar authentication API is available. It's typically made available to somebody called a Aadhaar authentication user agency, and some of these agencies we work with provide the ability for a sub-agency to work through them, and that allows you to use Aadhaar authentication. And since it's an API, the front end can be on the web, it can be a mobile application, both are fine. The next question is from Anmol. Will teams be provided any sandbox of the APIs in India Stack as they access government databases? Yes, the India Stack website, we have worked with partners to allow them to offer these APIs to developers. Most of these are in the test databases, etc. So you can get access to these. There are links that we had shared on the first screen, and I will share them again, and then we can let you know how to do that. What's the next question? So we have a question from Kumar on how to integrate Aadhaar database data with the Firebase database. So Aadhaar authentication provides you an API. It allows you to make a call which says, I have this data about this person. Here's his Aadhaar number. Here is his name. Can I verify it? Or here's his Aadhaar number and here is biometrics of this person. Can I make sure it is indeed the same person? And the answer is, so you can do that. It doesn't really depend on the database. However, you have to be careful because you're dealing with personal identity information, whether it's an Aadhaar number, it's a name or biometrics, and there are procedures specified for how you can capture it. You're not allowed to store biometrics, and how you can then, once you're following these processes, use the API to go ahead and make the calls. Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay. Now, so then maybe I'll walk through one other set of use cases. Sorry. So I just talked about the lending pilot. This pilot ran from April to June last year. And just a minute, sorry. Yeah, the pilot ran from April to June last year, and we had multiple lenders, marketplaces, and data providers participate in the pilot. The small tickets loan from 10,000 rupees to 1 lakhs. It was done across the country in multiple geographies. And each of these lenders saw a significant drop in their cost of originating a loan. They already saw certain costs for going from traditional to data-based, but then even from a data-based alternate lender to India Stack, they saw an additional 60% savings on the costs. On the cost of servicing, they expect an overall savings of around 50%. Collections are not yet done in the pilot, so they expected that there's an overall expected savings of about 30%. And in terms of risks, there's really no significant analytics yet to talk about how much savings could be done on that. We do expect to see limited savings there. And this enables a large credit system at scale, where you have millions of borrowers using their digital footprints and credit marketplaces using consented data sharing, enabled by mobile, fully data driven, using electronic contacts and digital payments for people to get access to credit. Access to credit is a big driver of growth, and we expect that a lot of poor people will be able to pull themselves out of poverty using the system. Another example comes from the mutual funds and the savings marketplaces, where today the income pyramid in India is such that 3 million households who are the richest, they have an income of over 17 lakh rupees, are the only people who are investing in the stock market. Now, this is not just because they're the only people with money, but because of the cost structures involved. So let's just consider those. Today, if there is a distributor of mutual funds, they are allowed an income of about 0.5% commission on the selling of mutual funds. On the other hand, when they have to get a customer on board, the cost of customer onboarding used to be as high as 1,000 to 1,500 rupees. And hence, the only customers they would onboard were ones who would be able to invest 3 lakh rupees in the first year. And that reduces the market size to exactly the 3 million households with income over 17 lakh rupees a year. On the other hand, with India Stack, if we are able to bring the cost of onboarding down to 100 rupees or even as low as 20 rupees, that starts to open up the next 31 million households who have an income of 3.4 to 17 lakh rupees and who would want to save using the stock market. Stock markets have significantly higher returns than savings products like bank accounts, and they then become accessible to this group only because India Stack is able to change the cost structure of savings. In fact, if you notice, the chit funds target the people at the bottom of the pyramid, and that is also because they have an aspiration to save, but the cost structures of the formal market are unable to service them. So we expect to see that with the reduced transaction size that comes with going down the pyramid, we'll still be able to have the mutual fund industry will be willing to service these customers. So here's a theory of financial inclusion. To increase the market size 10x or even 50x, the cost of doing business must come down. You don't actually need subsidies to do this. All you need is the ability to bring the costs down. Any more questions? I think we have some. Can we access the Indian Post database? Who's the author? Sorry? Vishal. So Vishal is asking, can we access the India Post database? So from what I know, India Post has made available a list of post offices and PIN codes across the country. It's a PIN code directory. Some of this data can be found on data.gov, and yes, so you can access that data. It's openly available. I don't know of any other Indian Post data that's accessible. I could be wrong. I mean, there could be more, but this is all I know. Great. So I'm going to go and walk you through one more example. So skills is another marketplace which could benefit from the India Stack. And the skills problem is really this, that you have a low trust environment where you don't trust credentials because they're very easy to fake. You don't trust training because, again, you don't trust the training providers. Hence, there's no premium for quality since you cannot measure the quality. And also when these people move jobs, so for example, a security guard moves from one employer to another, they're unable to take their history and experience with them in a provable manner, and hence it does not really result in salary growth for them. This leads to a lack of mobility. Now, we believe that if their training, employment, their earnings history were all traceable through documents in a way that could be trusted, that would increase our valuation of these, and hence people would start to see differentiated earnings. And this is really the value of, we see this in a more professional marketplace through LinkedIn, etc., where your employment history is a very valuable indicator of your skills, and you expect to grow throughout your life because you're getting better at the job you do. And we really want to see how this can be used to empower people at the bottom of the pyramid who have skills, who are learning, but are unable to monetize them. And this will, of course, allow multiple segments, whether it's transport, tourism, commerce, security, to grow, because your skills and experience become portable and you're able to benefit from that. Any more questions? No. So realistically, this is what we believe India Stack is about. It's about creating a digital infrastructure which, when combined with regulatory policy and with the role of the government as a market maker, creates the ability to have hundreds of experiments. So this is exactly what you are participating in when you're building for the nation. You are looking at various India-specific problems that have been given to you by various ministries, by people who are stakeholders in this progress. And you are then in a position to now do all of these different experiments very easily. It lowers the barrier to entry, and hopefully some of what you're doing will allow you to create a startup which can then start to solve these problems. Now, by nature, startups have a risk element, so many of these experiments will fail. But the ones that succeed are the ones that will help us to solve the hard problems that we have in the country. And that's really what we believe building for the nation means. So I'll just sort of close with the links again. Indiastack.org, there's the Slack channel, there's a overall description of the stack, and then for each API, we happen to have a different set of resources available for you to use. One more question? Yes. Okay. So we have one more question from Sumit. How to help Digital Locker to manage our documentation? This is a great question. So the Digital Locker is one of the newest pieces of the India Stack infrastructure. There is one such Digital Locker which has been created by the Government of India called DigiLocker. It's available at digilocker.gov.in. Already over 4 million plus users have come onto this Digital Locker, and there's about 6 million documents that they've uploaded in there. In addition to that, various service providers have made available about 1.6 billion documents in the repositories. This includes Aadhaar data, it includes driving licenses, motor vehicle registrations, 10th standard, 12th standard mark sheets, etc. And then there are many other certificates that the government issues which are there. They have provided an API as of last few days for you to be a requester of documents and for you also to be able to publish documents into the repository. I would encourage you to look at the site. On the India Stack website, we should have the links for you to follow through. And so as a developer, you can now put documents into the Digital Locker, tag it with an identity of the person so that they can have ownership of it, and then that person can share it with consent to somebody else. Any other questions? Great. So I will end with the links slide again, and really look forward to all of your solutions on this hackathon, and all the very best. Do use the resources on the site to your advantage. Great. Thank you.